It is my pleasure to have Nico Lumma here again. As I mentioned before, he does this every year, and he delights us today with his annual keynote here at 48 Forward. Nico Lumma.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of the thing that I'm talking about politics here, and you know, what we just heard from Kasper about Estonia, for me is kind of like the role model of how a state should think about digital. I think we're a little behind, just a little. And I was thinking about you know, talking about the actual politics right now going on, the debate we have, but I'm skipping that because it's too much detail. In my day life, I run the next media accelerator in Hamburg, and I focus on media innovation, but I also do some politics stuff on the side. And the thing that we see is the world is getting more complex. That, you know, if you look at this slide, it really shows how things are changing. You know, Netflix is essentially where we binge watch movies. Airbnb is the biggest accommodation chain, and they don't even own any hotel room. You know, Uber is the largest taxi company. They don't own any cars. It is just getting weird. And, you know, not everybody likes the ideas that are behind those companies. And we kind of, at least in Germany, we're sticking to a Silicon Valley mantra where, you know, every year, dozens of CEOs fly over to the Silicon Valley as the Holy Land and look at what they do, how they disrupt industries, and think this is the way to move forward. And I think it's actually the worst example you can have. If you've ever been to Silicon Valley, it's a really weird place. You know, it's so many rich people, so many poor people at the same time. Infrastructure that is not working, that's why they have Uber, and so on. I mean, it's just a really dysfunctional place, and it's not the ideal society I would love to live in, you know. And I just read something a couple of days ago that the housing is getting so expensive, even employees from Google and Apple can't afford housing there anymore. I mean, that's like the digital revolution is eating its children. That's nuts, you know. But this is how the world is moving. We're having more and more of those big platforms. And I think the speed of change is increasing, and we have been all seeing this for the last couple decades. You know, there's more and more innovation coming up. Kasper just talked about various things. You know, I mean, AI, that used to be like science fiction, and now it's the presence. You know, and Kurt Simon in the beginning talked about Alexa and that kind of stuff. I don't know if you remember that Star Trek movie from the 80s when the Star Trek guys fly back to the Earth in the mid 80s, and they have this problem with the Enterprise starship, and Scotty, the technician, needs a computer to solve that problem, and so the people from the Earth in mid 80s point him towards an Apple Macintosh, a classic Apple Macintosh, and tell him, there's the computer. So it goes to the computer and says, computer, please calculate. And the guy from the Earth says, no, you have to use the mouse. And so Scotty grabs the mouse and says, computer, please calculate. You know, and back then it was just, you know, it was science fiction if you could talk to a computer. And now it's all around us, you know. That speed is amazing, and it's accelerating even more. Of course, that's just the population curve of Bangladesh, but I think we all like those curves. That's why I always put it up. But, you know, a lot of people feel left behind because they just have this thing that they can't understand why everything is changing so much. And, you know, you guys probably remember that a couple of years ago when in Berlin, taxi drivers started to protest against Uber. And in Paris, people or taxi drivers started to violently protest against Uber, and in other cities. Why? Because they are taxi drivers, and all of a sudden, their future was threatened because somebody else was organizing or disrupting an industry. And that happens a lot of times. And that worries a lot of people, because if that's what you do, and somebody says, well, you know, that's kind of old-fashioned, let's do it differently, but without you, then your outlook is probably not the best. Also, simple answers to complicated questions never work. And we see that in a lot of ways. We see that with this guy who wants to make America great again by pissing off everyone else. And also by this guy who's also advocating for really, really bad ideas. And they get more and more votes. And why? Because he's offering simple solutions to complex problems. And I think we should really think about why this happens. Why do people feel disenfranchised? And what can we do to not leave them behind? I think if we want to keep the status quo as a country, we have to embrace change. You know, if we want to keep it, then we have to change so many things to just, you know, keep going. And that's a statistic. It's a couple of years old, but that's what you see over and over again. Jobs are at risk because of the speed of digital, because of the speed of change. And a lot of people have to rethink what they do. They have to get more education. They have to get different education. And they have to sometimes relearn their job. Or their job is gone and they have to do something else. But this will happen everywhere. It's not just a German thing. And I think we have been lucky for the last couple of years that our economy is so strong. But, you know, what you see oftentimes when you have exponential change, the beginning, it's very, very slow, and it looks like it's linear and everything's fine, and all of a sudden network effects kick in, and then you have a growth rate that's astonishing for most people. And yet we're so far behind here in Germany. You know, that's like one of my favorite charts. You know, broadband is something that we don't know here, basically because the German government owns parts of the German telecom, and they don't want to invest because they have copper wires from basically Adolf times, you know, and they still use copper to do broadband, which doesn't work, and it's stupid. And we have all known this for 20 years, but we don't want to invest money for broadband, and now we finally want to do it. You know, it just takes too long here. That kind of stuff takes too long because broadband is really, you know, basic. We need that for everything. And I think also the way we're doing our daily lives just changed tremendously in the last couple of years. You know, we expect Wi-Fi everywhere. We also expect to have enough battery power. You know, I used to be a skateboarder, and when I was like 15, I was always looking for stuff to jump on with my skateboard and do tricks and stuff. Now I always look for a socket where I can plug in because I need power. You know, it's kind of weird how your you know, things change for you. But you know, still we're so desperate. You know, we're not getting places. Do you remember that campaign? That's a campaign by the German army saying that they want to defend our freedom in cyberspace, and they were advertising on billboards at bus stops to get people as part of their cyber defense team. I mean, how desperate can you be if you need to do advertising at a bus stop to get really, really, really highly qualified people? That just won't work because they're not standing at a bus stop saying, oh yeah, I might just join the army. You know, that's what a weird concept. And they started this last year in 2017. That's something from 2010. I even found a cover of Time magazine talking about cyber war in 1995. And yet Germany is now starting to react on this. And they won't find the right people. Because who wants to join the army if they can join the private forces and earn whatever, 5 times as much money? You know, it just doesn't make sense. We're so far behind. And if you think about, you know, how desperate we are with the army and cyber stuff, you know, look at this. We can't even get tanks to roll, you know? And that's numbers from this week. You know, the dark blue ones are the tanks that actually work, you know, and that hasn't changed. When I was in the army, I was responsible for reporting those numbers at my battalion, and most stuff didn't roll. And I was located like 10 minutes away from the old border. And that's just really, weird and freaks me out that still the army is so behind in everything. But I don't want to talk about the army. I want to talk about 5 things we need to focus on to get this moving again. We have to talk about education, startups, jobs, digital consumers, and platform regulation. Might sound weird for you, but I think, as Caspar said, we have to educate people and we have to make people digital literate. And of course, that has to happen in schools. Of course, it has to happen with different curriculums than we have. And of course, this is a crazy task because nobody ever gets love for changing things at school. Teachers don't want change, parents don't want change, and yet everybody's demanding change, and that just doesn't work. And if you're in charge of education at a state level, if you want to change things in whatever way, people get pissed at you, so nobody wants to change anything because they want to keep their office. But we have to do this. And when you think about the current coalition contract that they're debating, at least they're finally changing something in a way that the federal government can now, give money to schools directly without interference of the 16 states. But this really has to change and has to change fast. Also, we have to do more startups. Why? Because that's where the innovation happens. Big corporations have a real big problem in staying innovative. It's really hard. But if you're a startup and you're naive, then you can just think about new stuff and implement it really fast. And you can do stuff that big corporations can't do. So we have to focus more on startups to get innovative people to do great stuff. And that's also a thing where we're really behind because we as the state gives out the wrong incentives. The M&A market in Germany still is really bad compared to other markets. And, we just don't spend enough money on that. In France, President Macron initiated something like 3 years ago when he was still in charge of economic affairs, and they're just pouring a lot more money into the system than we are in Germany. And things are moving forward in France at a much, much quicker rate than in Germany. Also, we have to talk about jobs. We have to talk about how we educate people for jobs and how we do on-the-job training and how that will change in the future. If you look at online educational courses like Udemy, and so on, they now go into nano degrees, because what we do here, like on-the-job training for 3 years as an apprentice, they now do nano degrees that take 3 months. Why? Because after 3 years, everything has moved forward so fast that what you learned is outdated. So you have to do it quicker and in shorter periods. And also, as a digital consumer, we briefly touched that when we talked to Caspar about data privacy. As a digital consumer, you have to be in charge of your data. And right now, good luck finding out what companies or the state knows about you. It's really hard, and it should be simple. It should be that you are in charge. And we have to work on that if we want to establish trust. And trust is the basis of what we do in the digital space. We have to trust that the transaction really works, that everybody's doing with the data as they tell you, and that's why we need more digital consumer rights. And finally, we have to really look at what's called GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and we have to finally think about regulation, and not think about it, but also do it. And that's not about destroying Google or something. It's about finding a regulatory system for big platform economies and make sure that everybody has access to those markets, and that there's an equal playing field for everybody. And that is just not the case right now. And there are a couple more big players that are creating ecosystems that have just one advantage for them, but not for everybody else. And we have to change that. Otherwise, there will be a bunch of really, really big players who dominate the market worldwide. And so far, politics has looked at this as like, well, this is different. I think we have to change stuff in order to regulate this, but we just don't know what. And I think, it's time to actually implement this now. But at the same time, we're still facing this, not enough bandwidth. We have those big things to tackle. We still can't do the basics. Everybody knows we have to do something, and yet we're not moving forward. And we're discussing things at a lengthy time instead of moving forward. We're getting, at the moment, there's a standstill where we're discussing things endlessly instead of doing something. And basically, that's your fault. All of you who are here, because you guys are smart, you guys are interested in the future, but I assume that most of you aren't engaged in a party. You're not doing something in the afternoon to work with kids on, whatever digital stuff. You're just not doing your part. And that's a problem we have in society, that those people who understand more about the future are not taking part of extracurricular activities. You do your job, you do sports, beer, movies, whatever in the evening, but you just don't commit as much as people used to. So it's your fault. And you need to change things in order for the society to get better. So, that's my typical stuff I say every year. Join those places where we talk about the future, like LOAD, which is the Association of the Liberates doing digital politics, or CNET from the CDU. I totally forgot the CSU, or join D64, which is an association I founded 6 years ago to think about digital society and digital process and influence politics. We have to do that. If we don't do this, then people will do it who have no understanding of what's going on. So really, you guys are in charge to change things for the better. Or join Bundesverband Deutsche Startups if you are doing a startup, because they are your advocates. So what's next? We're seeing this really accelerating growth in technology, and that's fascinating. But we have to take people along, and we have to be innovative. And we have to do this at a really, really quick pace. Steve Jobs once said, innovation is the only way to win. And I think that's what we have to think about when we think about politics and the way we do stuff. We're still running on a basis that was founded a long, long time ago. And everybody who does some coding, that you can patch something to a certain extent, but every once in a while you have to kind of like do a real rewrite in order to get stuff right. And I think we're like at that time. A lot of stuff we have that used to work brilliantly in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s is not working so brilliantly anymore. And we have to think about how we change that and, how to take people along into that future that we're all talking about. And I think we have to be more innovative to do that. Also, I want to invite you to come to Hamburg. In March, we're doing a hackathon called Take Europe to the Hearts, because I think Europe obviously is a big part of that. And we have to talk about how we can hack the EU and do new things with that. And we're really proud that Andrus Ansip, the Vice President of the EU Commission, will be there as well, because we want to push this really and get people moving on EU. And there's one more thing, or rather 5 things. Subscribe to my newsletter. It's called 5 Things. You'll get 5 things every morning about stuff that I care about, tech, society, and whatnot. So really, innovate or die, that's the motto of our company, and I think that's something that we have to embrace as a society as well. And you guys should go out there, join a political party, join a political club, help people get more digitized. All right? Thank you.